Hello everyone, it's time for another installment of my interview series. My guest today is the Nightmare owner, Fl4k, and this is going to be slightly different than some of my other interviews, because while we are going to talk about Nightmare at some point, because you've returned with a team for this season, I think a lot of stuff has happened behind the scenes before we got to that point, so I want to sort of go all the way back to the beginning of the story, the start of the off-season, sort of after Stockholm. What happened from the sort of Nightmare in your own perspective?
I mean, after Stockholm, it was a lot of planning, like get stuff really ready really fast and be the first team ready. And so we here at Stockholm, it's the 3-3-3, and we hear about the LAN events and some of the locations, and the rest is kind of up in the air. But we have enough information to play with, so we knew that we really wanted to try to get one of those top teams really quickly. And I knew I wanted to build it out of most of my guys, and so what we looked to first at Nightmare was to look to partner with another organization that would get into the partner slot, because we probably couldn't do it alone. I'm not going to share which org that was, but we brought it to Blizzard, and they were totally fine with it. It was more we couldn't find a way to make it sustainable for two people on the back end, just because the way the partner program works. It was a little bit difficult to say, hey, we'll give this split, you give this split, but one of us isn't going to make money after the fact.
Hmm.
So that didn't really go through, and we were kind of Nightmare was kind of left hanging, but not for any bad intention on anybody. It's just that was the result. And so around, I'd say, early to mid December, we were pretty locked in on two partner teams in NI, and they had become Team Liquid and SSG, and then we were waiting on the last one, and I start getting a bunch of messages from people at Blizzard and people just in the community, and they're asking, was Nightmare picked? And I even had the social media manager of the Overwatch page reach out to me and ask, oh, we have this graphic for you guys ready. Were you guys picked? Um and so it for a minute, it really felt like, even though we weren't really hearing the response that we want, like that we were pretty close to getting it. Um, and our only competition was FlyQuest, or so the community thought, right? At this point, C9, I hardly consider them a factor in a big part of this picture, because they really were just in and out so fast. They didn't do player talks. They didn't. They really, all they did was look at the agreement, say yes, and then have second thoughts. And so it was really quick. As far as I know, C9 was just in and out. Didn't really do much. They were not a big part of this whole equation. It just, I think they had high hopes and then got in and realized that the scene in NA was just kind of difficult to work with, since they were getting there last and didn't have much of a
Hmm.
say to a lot of the imports and the top NA talent. So while I don't know 100% why they left, I'm not surprised they didn't. But then FlyQuest was really the last one, and I reached out to them, and they were like, we didn't have any interest in Overwatch at any point. Um, they they you know behind closed doors, they just looked at the agreement, and said, no, I don't think it's gonna work. They there was never anything like C9. They were never in. They just um, didn't think the agreement was worth it, just like a lot of the larger scale organizations, and didn't get involved at all. And so that really just left us. And so at this point, I had already been informed that the 2222 was going to happen between NA, Europe, Asia, and China. And I was just like praying, maybe, like, are they really going to do this? They announced it in Stockholm as
Hmm.
333. Maybe there's a chance. And so, you know, we prepare a bunch of pitch decks and get a lot of stuff, and it doesn't fall through at the end of the day. But we got pretty, like I tell a lot of people, we got pretty close. and just couldn't, no cigar, which happens. But I think something that we really want to show this season with our team now is that NA needed the third spot.
When you were talking to Blizzard and having these sort of interactions about the possibility of Nightmare coming in, and then ultimately, because I guess ultimately then the decision kind of came between yourselves and ZETA Division more than anything else. Were you given any kind of indication from Blizzard on what they were looking for, or what maybe you guys were missing compared to some of the organizations they did go with?
What kind of sucks is we weren't missing anything. We were pretty on the beat on everything except for size. Our plans going into next year in different esports like League of Legends and Marvel Rivals were really sound. Our creative direction and community engagement, it was really really good, and they loved pretty much everything about it. I think it was just really rough, and I know the decision in the back came down to, even though they didn't tell me directly, it really did come down to us and ZETA. Um, and because I know that they were the last team picked, or yeah, no, they were the last team picked over there because it was the two teams from last year, and then T1 came in pretty early, and then ZETA was the last one picked. So, um, yeah, it in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that was the decision. At the same time, it's like people ripped into Blizzard last year for not having more of that Asia representation, especially for a team in an organization like ZETA Division. So like, I can't get too upset because everything makes a lot of sense. It's just really unfortunate because we put it like, we were making our run all last year with the intention of like we might be able to get this partner program. But even though we didn't, it's not like I regret it. It's just we still got a bit more left to prove, I suppose, on both the organization and the player side. So
If this situation hadn't have happened when it sort of was a third spot and then it got moved to Korea, were you planning to field a team anyway this year, or was it
no,
entirely sort of a last minute decision?
yeah, it was really last minute. We didn't get partnered, and I thought, and a lot of the people in my organization were like, Overwatch is not a smart investment at the scale that we did last year. And so I'm looking at a lot of the numbers that we had from last year of like winnings and expenses, and where we can save money, and I came up with something that is, the players still, it's just a good sustainability structure that everybody's pretty happy with, but it's not the same luxury as a partner team. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the way I built the structure is so like there's at least some return or at least a sense of breaking even. But um, with the partner program, it's like I can stretch a lot further. Especially into like boot camps and extra travel and stuff. I'd say that partnership program like return is just great because pretty much you don't have to worry about paying salaries for like the whole year, and then boot camps I'd say are pretty included, and then like there's a few extra costs that like a lot of orgs have to take into account, um but for us that would have been huge. It would have been everything. And we didn't get it. And so ZERUhh cleared Admiral. I've stuck really close to me because I've kept them in the loop on a lot of what's happened during the off season. And I told them like, you guys should really just stick together because you will create the third best team in NA. And it just wasn't looking good. Nobody else
Yeah.
is out here. There is nobody's coming. Nobody's like coming to save us. We are alone in an A, and nobody new is showing up. We got a few other smaller organizations coming in, but we just got too many people coming out. And I'm proud that some of the organizations in NA, like Rad, has stepped up to the plate with these really determined rosters. But in terms of we don't have any of those like mid-size organizations like ourselves. Like YFP recently left Overwatch. Um, we just not seeing a lot of people who want to come in and do a lot. We just actually got Supernova. They're a pretty decently sized org in NA, and they came in, but it's just rough. There's no incentive to do anything in NA anymore, especially for organizations, for teams that aren't in the partner organization, and the players who aren't on those teams. No incentive to really climb out of like the tier 2 area to attempt a tier 1, because just the way up is too blurry. So
it feels like even though a lot of the partnership program is good and gives orgs a sustainability in Overwatch, that was maybe not there last year. It feels like there has been kind of a divide created. Whereas if you're in the partner program, you're in this sort of luxury position, you can afford to do a lot more. But if you can't get into that partner program, there's no incentive to invest.
Yeah, so last year, we invested pretty heavily because we really just needed to make our first year a big one, and I think we did a great job. But after EWC, I heard that the partnership program was coming, and so we really made sure to focus on that. We heard what they were looking for, not just a good team, although that's really important. They are looking for large scale interactions on social media, and they're looking for co-streamers and casters, and they want to make sure that, the team is more than just the team. And so in prep for Stockholm, we really built that out. And got a lot of people to work on every angle of the organization. We had like a huge group that showed up to Stockholm, and I think in Stockholm, showing our face to a lot of those staff and giving our thanks to like the fact that the structure was like so loose and open was like very much a blessing for us, because we couldn't pay what Overwatch League orgs were paying to get in. And so um the partnership program, it just, we kind of knew that it was going to be a long shot, but at the same time, it's like maybe we thought there was some way to change it in their minds, like maybe take less or argue it down or something. But we tried in a lot of different angles and just couldn't really land it.
I guess it's always hard when you're coming in as the sort of new kid on the block, and then some of the people you're going up against in terms of the other applicants are people with really sort of long established histories, either long established histories in the game, even like Cloud9 being in Overwatch League, NRG being in Overwatch League, T1 just being one of the biggest. There's like really high competition and makes it really hard for a new org to compete with that.
Yeah, and that's why, straight out of the gates, after stock, and our first intention was like, we really need to find an organization we can partner with. But once we found that and locked it down again, it's just like the partnership program, to partner for the partnership program, it's not enough return for one large scale org. Two, I'm essentially just like a sponsor at that point. It didn't make enough runs.
And then we probably have to talk about NRG at some point in all of this. Obviously, most of the Nightmare stuff all happens, I guess, after that to a degree, in terms of after Cloud9 dropping out and that spot opening again. What do you make of that? Because obviously that was really the sort of, I think, the linchpin moment where NA went from 3 spots to 2 spots in the end.
Yeah, I think with the loss of their big orgs, because I think the way that they were looking at it on the back at one point wasn't really with like the region limits were pretty loose. I really think that they kept in mind that like we can shift this around a little bit to just here's how many we need. We don't really care the lineup that much. 2-2-3-4. 3-3-3. Whatever. But I think with like NRG and Toronto and all these orgs, they kind of came in, looked, and either didn't apply or did apply and something went wrong. That really hurt NA, because that was our, top dogs, and they were the people who really, gave to the scene last year, along with Nightmare and NA, representing them in Stockholm for the last tournament, and being the teams to actually like put a a nail to Toronto Defiant in some certain cases. It really seemed strange that they couldn't lock in that partner program for Toronto. You know, now that we kind of understand a bit more about why they didn't apply, it makes a lot of sense. Like an org like them or an org like, I kind of look at Team Liquid and it confuses me as to like how they think they'll make sustainability because they have a lot of resources they have to cover and I'm assuming that they're doing a team house in wherever their headquarters are, and that space, flights, the partner program is good for like the salaries and maybe a few extra costs like a boot camp, but living space, so visas, it's not going to cover a lot of that stuff. So it's hard to see a lot of the bigger orgs coming into this. I'm really curious, like, how do they plan on making this sustainable with what the return looks like? Um, so that not for them, like NRG in Toronto not wanting to get in for that reason, it makes perfect sense. But for like speaking with NRG, they were pretty crushed about the situation. They Overwatch is really close to like a lot of orgs and org owners and just people in esports, like everybody's heart. And so, there was some from frustration from NRG, but I really think it came from a place of like they wanted to do something good and they were shut down. Um, and it sucks, but that was really the moment where, for a split moment, it was probably like, okay, let's give it to Nightmare and NA, but before that, before that solidified anywhere, it was in Asia. So
I think for what it's worth, Team Liquid, they're doing a team house, but the players are sorting it. So Team Liquid will provide them
uh
with resources and they'll sort out the visa for knife and stuff, but
okay.
they're not providing the house itself.
Oh,
Um,
oh, okay. Yeah, because the Team Liquid's got to have some just like sustainability, like, or sustainable like structure in Overwatch to hop into it. They're too smart over there. They're too big. They've been through this too many times before. I'm just really curious what it is, because they are so large. Not to say that it's only like small organizations that are really going to benefit from this, but Team Liquid is like one of the biggest, and I'm not surprised that they're able to make it work. But I'm curious, like, what their model looks like. What expenses, because all the players signed, right? So what are they giving the players that, they're all, they've got two thumbs up coming from Team Liquid. They're all really enjoying it. They feel very well set up and secure. But how much can they give those players before it's too much money wasted? Is my concern. I don't know if the partner program really, unless you're the top performing organization, can do a whole lot in terms of like adding that extra, like, you know oh, we're going to give you extra benefits because we're Team Liquid, or because we're, whatever. It's like, I don't can you afford those extra benefits? It's just really tough because, looking at a lot of the price points of the partnership program, it's, the points throughout the year that you receive stuff are a little odd. It's also just like you're really gate kept from a lot of the revenue, just due to a split and due to the fact that, while you're competing for your revenue in terms of like trying to create impressions on social media to sell your skins, you're also competing with every single other organization because if they sell more skins than you, then they just get more. So
yeah.
it's not down to the skin number of like skins sold per se. That's one of the few factors that goes into it, but everything as a whole kind of sums up like how much you'll be receiving from Blizzard, and um, that level of uncertainty is a little risky as well.
Because also, orgs like T1 also sort of sits in that category of one of the biggest orgs in the world in terms of sort of scope and popularity and all of this. So clearly, they've done the numbers some way and come to the conclusion that there will be value and there will be return on this at some point in the year, or at least a sustainability type of model, you would assume.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it definitely exists. I'm just mad at myself that like I can't find it. It's definitely only for partner teams, right? You can't come into Overwatch and host the third best team in NA, which has to be like this team has to be China ready. This team has to be EWC ready. We need to cause the upsets, and they know that. But um, it's tough because I looked at that partnership program like pretty thoroughly, especially once we started hearing back from Toronto and NRG that like or not from NRG but from Toronto and some of these other organizations that the sustainability in the program just wasn't there. um I couldn't find it either, so I'm really curious what some of these bigger organizations are doing to make sure that they see the money back later. And maybe there's one of the big factors is the EWC partnership program that gives club points, but it, some of these orgs aren't even like partnered at EWC. So you know I don't
I
know.
get. I
I
guess
got
it
more
could be a
research
sort
to do, I
of.
guess.
I guess it could just sort of almost be like a double dip type thing. Like you partner with Blizzard and you get a certain amount back from the partnership program, and then you attend the Esports World Cup, and you also then your team competes at the Esports World Cup, and then you kind of get like almost two
Yeah,
sets of support, and that then like across the year balance
yeah.
out a net positive or something like this.
Although I've from what I've seen and just from what I've heard, a lot of these larger organizations are kind of turning away from EWC a little bit. Um, just because so like Overwatch last year, we saw how many organizations did we see come into Overwatch during like 20 or so? Like it was a lot from all sizes, people who came in looking to spend money for the incentive of the Esports World Cup. There were a lot of organizations, and now we have like five of those orgs still left. The EWC kind of incentivized um coming in and coming out of esports like quickly. You know, come get into Overwatch, your podium finish will get huge reward for the partner program for the EWC. Or if you're shooting for the partner program for the EWC, having Overwatch is something that we're looking for. And everybody came in, and there wasn't enough structure in during that last year for orgs to want to stay. And so, they came in, got their EWC money, got their recognition, and left. And I'm just worried that with the EWC, especially with games like Marvel Rivals is now kind of like maybe the EWC 2025, 2026 maybe. I'm worried that it's going to happen again with a game like that, or just from what I've heard from a lot of org owners, they really don't want to get into EWC because they don't really like that. They really want to get into games because they have a lot of research done in it. They really want to get into it. They want to focus on the community and providing them cool content and great play. And the EWC doesn't really incentivize that super hard. It's more just like show up with this title and bonus rewards, but show up with that title for a week, show up with that title for a few months.
But even when we talk about all the orgs that came in last year, how many of those orgs came in at the start of the year versus how many of those orgs came in a month or two before Esports World Cup to try and
Yeah.
sign a relevant team and then dipped again? And I guess in many ways there's an argument for the partner program because rather than orgs being incentivized by one tournament a year, that's just 1 week of the year, to then come in a couple of months before, leave a couple of months after. If you're partnering with it, it's an 11-month season, so you're sort of partnering, committing to the whole year. And presumably, I don't know exactly how long the partnership agreements are, but in theory, there's probably some kind of like after the first year, you can carry on going and carry on going. If you're still interested in going, which makes it more of a long-term model. That in theory makes the orgs that come in actually want to stick with the game rather than just looking for essentially a punt investment to see how well they can do at the Esports World Cup.
Yeah, I agree. And EWC for this year, especially with the team that we got, is really China. we're really aiming for it with our lineup. And but EWC kind of opens the doors a little bit more to more qualification spots from North America. And or from last year did that, and from what I've heard, this year will do it as well. And so um that's really the thing we got to make. EWC, at under no circumstances can we not make EWC. China is, that'll be really close, but I think we can. But we'll just have to see. Everything is still a bit like shaky with our team, with the rest of the teams. Everybody's learning where people go. Backline synergies, these are being built, understanding between the coach and the players. But I think with Nightmare's lineup this season, it's easily like, if you saw that team and we said we were partnered, you'd be like, makes sense. Yep. I mean, like the lineup is, it's hard to, I read a lot that like, oh, CJ got picked up for SSG over UV. That's absurd. Like same with like honestly the Rack Attack Admiral situation too. That was a big thing on my plate about a week and a half ago, where it was like pick up Rack for the synergy with UV, or keep Admiral for the synergy with the ISU boys, cuFFa and Lethal. And the third spot and NA was more than just like go to Nightmare. You know what I mean? Like, or at least that we hope. It was more that like there's too much talent still left in the region that played on a world stage and did well in the world stage. Not to toot NA's horn here, but we did do better than Europe and in Stockholm.
It's
Like,
true. Yeah.
yeah,
Hard to argue.
and so yeah, like Dallas, Europe did better, and they were rewarded with more EWC spots. And then in Stockholm, NA does better, and we're rewarded with one less partner spot. It's just tough. But I do think that the team that we've made is, still a partner like level team, and will, make the upsets. Like I tell this to a lot of people, but like ZETA is the most dedicated and driven player I've like ever interacted with in my entire life. Um, and not to say the rest of the team isn't driven, but I think that passion that I saw physically last year in ZETA, and the passion that he comes to my DMs with, when we're 2 days out of roster lock and he's like, can we just do this for like anything? And I was like, yeah, we can. We didn't have an animation ready for the roster reveal, unfortunately, but Clear cooked up something great last second. It was super funny. And it worked out well, and I'm pretty excited to get back into it this year.
It was quite, interesting in many ways, because we saw a sort of situation at EMEA where an org like Heretics were interested and offered a partner program, but then once they got to the roster construction side of it, didn't feel like they could actually put together a roster that could compete for one of these top spots to qualify for LAN. Whereas, despite finding yourself in quite a last minute situation, the team you've ended up with is actually a really stacked team. Really, I think, comparable in a lot of ways to SSG and even Team Liquid as well. So you must actually be quite happy with how everything's worked out, at least in terms of the final set of players you're able to get together.
Oh yeah, it couldn't have gone better. With we I was kind of always leaving the door open throughout the entire off season. The goal was like, let's find you an organization that's going to pay you guys nicely in NA, or let's find an organization outside of NA that would like to partner, and then they take you guys for EWC. There, even after not getting into the partnership program, partnering was still like, just the best play to pay the players the most. And so we looked high and low, and we're still looking. If any orgs want to partner with the Nightmare Overwatch roster, I'm open to it. We couldn't find it. But I think the players after last year, sticking close to me throughout the off season, I was kind of helping them with information and sort out, what they should do. We got huge level of like trust now, and they know that I'm working really hard to put more money into them while still having it make sense. We're still shooting for the partner program long term. I can't give them as many resources as I did last year, but I can, give them what I can, and we can feel it out. But we, maybe a boot camp might line up with another game that we're currently hosting. For the China region. There are
Mhm.
possibilities, and but one thing I'm doing this year is I'm not, when I'm planning things out with the team, I'm not really looking at anything as a guarantee. It's all like we can aim to do this, but whether you qualify or not, we really got to look into things because we wrote out our budgeting for the other teams that we have and then picked up Overwatch. Because
Yeah. Okay.
and so, not to say that we're like treading on some like thin line or anything. It's just we're not reworking the other two budgets for the other two games because of this. Um, I'd rather because I really like the way that I've built out our models for the other two games. But they are pretty like there's no wiggle room on either of those cases. So um, Overwatch, I'm still really looking deep at like, okay, what are the winnings going to look like for this year? What are the LAN events going to look like for this year? Where are the price points going to be? And seeing if like even as a non-partner team, we can still maybe cut even. So that's really the goal.
How much then, without the partnership program, what are you relying on in terms of giving you that sustainability or giving you that sort of return on investment?
So for the Esports World Cup, what we've heard countless times is that three esports is really the time when the Esports World Cup starts taking you more seriously. Um, the Esports World Cup isn't necessarily something that we're like, oh yeah, let's go partner with. Maybe if we got the opportunity, we definitely think on it and look at the price points more. But it's definitely something that we're looking at as kind of like the sweet spot. Three esports, grow into enough markets, get our merchandise out to enough people, receive enough winnings. But really, the sustainability is going to come from how much can salaries be and what do winnings look like throughout the year. And since we're only playing with that, and the third piece is usually either like MTX or game developer investment in the organization or sponsors. We don't really have any of that, and so we really need to find the sustainability through just what the winnings look like, what place we think we're gonna finish, and then we can look for some extra help as we go along. But um, I'm just gonna have to do what I did last year and kind of uh, well, not throw a bunch of just cash at trying to make the name for ourselves. That was the goal for last year. This year, it's more like how do we keep the ball rolling, but make money make more sense.
Hmm.
And so I feel like the lessons I learned last year have lined me up nicely this year, and I think we can see like steady growth. And then later into the year, we want to open with our fourth esport and keep the ball rolling. But there was a moment where, and this was the turning point where I was thinking, and I was like, if we drop Overwatch and don't host a pro team, that's pretty much all of our following up to this point that we're just kind of like dropping.
Hmm.
Not or it kind of letting down. It's just kind of it's not like anybody would not understand. We were kind of thrown on like a wild, off season. But um still it's like to make that stretch into the next game that we're hosting, so like League of Legends and Marvel Rivals, while it's still kind of like heating up. It's I don't think we could have waited for the other games to grow enough to leave Overwatch without it making sense. Obviously, these are all cope reasons. I love Overwatch, and it's hard for me to leave because I love the game, I love the
Yeah.
players. Like this is the game I watch. This is this is my game. Like, but it made enough sense in other areas that it was like, okay, we can do this.
And I want to ask a little bit because obviously, as you've mentioned, you're expanding into other games as well. But the two games you're expanding into are actually very different in terms of League of Legends, one of the most established esports available, and Marvel Rivals, very much the new hot thing, right? So, what's your experience been like going into both of these when they're very different esports scenes currently?
Yeah, so Marvel Rivals, been kind of competing in since like June. We got fourth place in the alpha tournament, and then first place in the beta tournament, and then played the private Chinese play tests and came out the gates swinging. Won the first two tournaments, got second in the third, and building a structure off of that game has been really easy because the game developer is supportive. The model for like tournaments per year is really easy and nicely laid out. Um, Really, the hardest part would have been finding the players, but we've been, hosting pretty much the same group since June, and so these guys were really ready. All it was finding a coach, and that was kind of difficult because it's like, hey, I need you to take a leap of faith and just like leave like Overwatch or leave whatever game you're in
Hmm.
right now and come do this game and like make sure we're the best. And Crimzo was that guy. He extremely established coach, good buddies with everybody on the team, and I feel like without someone like him, we wouldn't really be able to keep the leg up that we currently have from just playing longer. And so, Marvel Rivals has been pretty easy to navigate, especially since it is so similar to Overwatch, and it's not like I've missed anything. I've been here since the first time you were able to play the game, and I loved it. And so, League of Legends is really insane. Um, I have a certain like department of my staff that are dedicated to the league expansion because I'm not super 100% on the game, but we, any sort of price points or anything like it, I can understand it. It's just I don't really understand the game. I understand the competitive structure and the tournament structure, but
Hmm.
the game itself is something I'm still learning. But
It's a complicated game. Yeah.
yeah, things that we do like, it's a tier 1 esport. Some of the biggest money in esports, one of the largest names in esports. There's a lot of things it has going for it. It makes it very shiny for organizations to want to get in, but the barrier of entry is extremely high. And so I think we're doing it for, building a team at the level that it is for a lot cheaper than a lot of other organizations have done it because we're kind of going with the like, okay, let's pick up like LeBron James and then surround him by like the best of like college basketball, like uh we have kind of like two tier 1 players and then we brought up some tier 2 players to come compete at the same level, and so you know they're learning while the other people are kind of like helping refine their skills, and then they'll be ready for the open qualifiers into NACL, then play in NACL with a goal of making LTA eventually. League of Legends new model for NA actually looks really nice. The way that they've changed from LCS to LTA, and it's been great. We've been having a great time. It was just funny when we were building the roster. Our first kind of welcome into the community was someone had gotten a hold of our roster from a huge leak page, and they were like holding our information like ransom if we didn't like give them more. And so they were like, you can review and help write the article we're going to put out if you tell us who your next two players are. Like, okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
sounds a little bit like a ransom note, doesn't it?
yeah, like
Yeah.
why? Like, okay, I guess. And so we lined up the reveal of our first player with the leak site just because they do have a large following. It was just kind of like the first thing into it, and then that's it. But I think the League of Legends team has put the status of the organization on kind of a pedestal, though. That being a tier 1 esport that does kind of have that large barrier of entry has kind of automatically, well, and our players' level of play, of course, has kind of like established us on a really nice spot in the community where I'm able to make and ask a lot of questions to like different size organizations, some huge, some around our size, that they're really only taking my time because like they see our league project.
You're
And
involved. Yeah.
yeah, and nobody really wants to talk to just the org that did okay in Overwatch last year. Um, Expanding is something we knew we always had to do, but I'm glad that it's going so well, and we definitely will continue to look to expand. But I don't think we need to expand like too much further. I think it's really about like finding 3 to 5 esports, refining them, and then competing at both, the competitive side, community following. There's a lot of things we can do once we're in the game, and so now that we're in both Marvel Rivals and League of Legends, we need to do exactly what we did in Overwatch and kind of create that connection between us and our engagement, our following, our community, and understand like what works and what doesn't. Why we're gonna go into these new communities, show people what we are, and then we need to, if people like it, then we need to establish why people like it or how we can refine it to the game. So now we have like, without spoiling too much, we have an animation in both these new games coming up, and we're really hoping that the fan bases will really engage with that because our style of animation is something that's somewhat unseen in the industry.
I want to ask as well, now you've sort of started to expand into other esports, is there anything you've seen in any of these other games that you'd like to see introduced to Overwatch? Not necessarily in terms of the games themselves, but more in terms of the esports structure or how the orgs are supported in those games.
Yeah, I think so Marvel Rivals, being so new, I think they're making great strides at supporting organizations and giving players a lot to chew on, even while their, like, or game dev partner, whatever, is still like brewing. We've heard whispers that, and that's what we're playing for, is like get into that franchising partner, whatever it is, and
Mm-hmm.
and we want to be ready for that. But while that's still like being cooked by them, they're doing a great job at giving us the support, giving us the spotlight, promoting us and giving the players tournaments to in platforms, and it's been really great. And I think um, Overwatch, one thing that they could take from Rivals, in my opinion, is I think that the online structure of tournaments that they do that are hosted in game are very nice, and they just kind of make it easy for people, because I think a big problem with a lot of these external platforms, like, nothing wrong with fundamentally what Face It does, but I do think that it's harder to get casual people who just kind of boot up the game to play the game to actually like get on that site and enter into these tournaments. I think Marvel Rivals, the MRC, just that in-game tournament, and it prompts you slightly when you open the game. I think that did a lot to get the casual audience more engaged in like this kind of level of competition and tournament, and I think that will start to see more people trying to compete in that game, because the access is so easy. You don't need anything but the game to compete in the game. Um, then with League of Legends, I haven't gotten too deep into their structure yet, but I do really like the way that they're doing like LCK, LTA, basically like the new LCS
Mm-hmm.
that's based on region is really interesting. But like, I really like it, and I think that Overwatch is like trying to do something similar, just on a much smaller scale. Um, so I can't really say like, oh yeah, Overwatch should try to do that, but I think I could say that um they're already kind of trying. Like, I think they need to figure out the regions and just make it like just make more sense. I think an even split across regions would make the most sense, but like, obviously League of Legends is much larger than Overwatch, but I do think that that regional competition that they're currently incentivizing is really good. I do think NA is going to be boring since it is just two of them. I think people in NA will find quickly that that two is more like three, maybe even four in NA right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what they're doing with the OWCS is nice, but in League of Legends they would have been, everybody who qualified for OWCS in all the regions is in the program, instead of
Yeah.
just two of those teams. Although I do understand, it's very different. Like, we're working with different sets of money, a different developer, a different
Yeah.
layout, like everything's different. And so I just do really like the way that like the regional tournaments through LTA that are hosted and done in region. There's LAN events for it. I think regional LAN events and just more regional focus
Hmm.
is something that I'd really look for. Like yeah, Nightmare, we were thinking at one point maybe host like a state tournament, right? Do
Oh,
something for
okay, yeah.
NA. And so but it's just tough because it's just a different scene. Although I do think that NA can't really see as much creativity as EU and Asia with that kind of stuff because we only have two of those partner spots. I think in the future with more partner spots, I predict like Toronto hosting the grand finals, stuff like that
Hmm.
can become a lot more common with more just action in the region. I think we'll start seeing that again like soon now that we're actually partnered with organizations like hosted events from the orgs that Blizzard leans into is definitely something I expect to see like really soon.
Yeah, I think that's always these problems, and it happens in every game when there's some kind of partnership or franchise system. Even kind of happened in Overwatch League, right? Is once you partner with certain teams, what you essentially do is because you partner with some, you exclude everyone else, and it can be
Yeah.
sometimes hard to balance. How do you support the scene from top to bottom and still give everyone sort of fair access or fair support for their relative size? And it feels like Overwatch is maybe it's hit like a big reset button at the end of Overwatch League, and we're now sort of restarting that building process. Maybe compared to like CS:GO is always an interesting example because they fund a lot of teams or help fund a lot of teams through sticker money, and sticker money is just
Yeah.
earned through qualifying to the major. So that is whether you qualify as a Cloud9, as a Team Liquid, as a G2 or whatever, or if you're just five guys who are really good at CS and you make it through the qualifying, you make the spot, you still get the money whether you've got that. There's no partnership as such in the same way. So I think there's lots of different models, and it feels like Overwatch is just right at the start of that.
Yeah, especially when you look at the numbers for the partnership program, it's like
Mm.
it's the way I break it down to people is like for an org like Nightmare, that would have like really built the org and set us going for kind of the long run. And then you take an org like Ents size, right? They're pretty big, but they're probably at like 50,000 or 100K on Twitter or something like that. Like they they've been around for a second. They're in multiple esports. They got a good understanding. They got a good cash flow, but they're just working on increasing numbers, right? And then you got an org like SSG or NRG, and they're pretty good size, and they can really only look at this partner deal and say, okay, I think the goal is just to cut even. Um, and then anything bigger than that, and it's I can't imagine how you're coming into this and not losing money. So um, it's just like with the T1 and Team Liquid size organizations, it really I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that they're doing this and somehow it's not a huge loss, which I'm sure it makes sense, but I'd like to understand how. Um,
I guess there's always
I
the
don't know.
possibility it's like it doesn't make sense in 1 year, but in a 2 year, 3 year type of scale, it does make sense. Or there's some kind of like scale there that they think they can achieve that will mitigate anything that they don't get in the first year.
Yeah, that definitely could be a possibility. I always just find it like kind of risky to plan for that, just because the scene is so like sporadic. The players are so like infected this season. I know he really wanted to play with Korean Vega, but who knows if next season it's like, or even after just this first qualifying event to China, or maybe after China when he goes, he maybe realizes something and then his mind is changed again. I'm not trying to target out infected or anything like this. I'm just saying that players, after LAN events, really then kind of get that real judgment of like, okay, let's keep going, or I need to switch something. And so I really write out our stuff to kind of coincide with those LAN events.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, being a partner, you have to write out things a bit longer. But I'm curious, like, of they'll be hosting a good team throughout the year, but I am curious, like, if that's accounted for, or if they would even allow it, like, or if they just wrote out these contracts to a year long. But who knows?
Yeah, no, I've heard kind of mixed things of like some people just on 1 year contracts, or some people on like 1+1 contracts. Obviously, I
Okay.
guess most teams, because I think even in Korea, there was a lot of talk that actually a lot of the players on the big three were essentially tied into multi-year deals, which is why the roster
Wow.
changes seemed, well, pretty much non-existent for those top three teams for the most
Yeah.
part, give or take some retirements.
That I mean, I'm not surprised at the long contracts. It's just hard to see some of these players like sitting still for that long. I feel like a lot of these guys are really young and are still figuring out who they like to play with in the scene. Um, and so I don't know. It might be interesting. For some reason I predict buyouts being more in play this year than last year.
But that's also like that ends up being like a motivating factor to try and lock people down or get them in, because then
Yeah.
if there is that movement, you have some ability to recoup some of those costs. And
Hmm. I were there any buyouts last year? Or was it all under Nightmare?
um,
Did any other orgs do any buyouts?
I don't I don't think so. Did TM do one for Bliss? I think.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah,
you're
because
right.
there was that whole drama with
Bliss,
Faith and
yeah,
everything as well.
yeah.
But I think they did maybe one for Bliss.
I could really see LAN events coming into play and people seeing where the talent lies and like buyouts coming through. Not really like cross regional buyouts. But I could see like Asia stirring up and with China to the point where like buyouts do become something that people they do like consider. I really bet that the organizations that are in the partner program probably wrote out their buyouts to be less of like an impossible number that they don't want people to make and more of like a strategic point that's like if someone's willing to pay this much for this, like we
It's
get a large
actually worth
return
the
and could get
sacrifice.
and
Yeah.
yeah and could get someone better, something like that. I really wouldn't be surprised if people are putting that more into play than they are last year.
There's always a question with the roster lock as well, because now with the EWC functioning as the end of stage 2 LAN, will there be a roster lock in between regular season stage 2 and qualifying and the actual LAN itself? Or would you be stuck in, like, if you want to make those moves, you actually have to make them quite far in advance if you're going to really try and ramp up for EWC or something? Like, to be fair, I don't know what the rules are in terms of where the roster lock comes into play, but compared to last year where it was just a standalone event, right? So it was very easy for people to come in and just build a new
Yeah.
team to qualify for that, or build a new team, put them into the FACEIT qualification tournament, and then just qualify, right? That's what we saw like Virtus Pro do and others. So I don't know if it's going to actually be more complicated this year because it's all folded into OWCS a little bit more.
Not sure, but I do know that like EWC is something in like FACEIT is obviously something that they're trying to fit a lot with Overwatch, like try to fit their structure a good amount. But I'm curious if some of these OWCS events, because from what I remember with the last EWC, we had um a thing happen with a player and that we did bro moment and they were pretty lenient and easy with like hey, we're gonna take a different player on loan, and it was not super last second, but it was definitely after the time of the roster lock, and they were they I mean they made it easy. I as well a lot of the name changes for a lot of the teams like what did the team that Hunter
Makers, yeah.
Yeah. They took the Australian team, and then uh, ROC took the South American team.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that was done pretty like last second. Usually, like, at least from what I've seen with a lot of these tournaments, your name change capability also comes in last second with your ability to change roster members. And so, um, and that was pretty like up till I mean, like, that must have been like what, days before the event. So I'm
It was
curious if
after they
EW's,
qualified, yeah. So like everything, they'd already like qualified and everything was sort of set in motion for them to attend the
yeah.
event, and then they got the deal with an organization for some kind of sponsorship.
Mhm, I gotcha.
All right, Flag. I do appreciate all your time and all your insight, and the best of luck to you and the new Nightmare squad as well. I'm sure everyone's actually very happy to see you return to Overwatch, and the squad looks pretty good as well. OWCS is kicking off on the 31st as well, so we look forward to your first games. Best of luck, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. It'll be a good year, and we're looking forward to, even though it was last second and everything, we're still looking to give it our all and make it a good standout year for Nightmare. So I'm excited. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.